to introduce our final speaker of the day, Mr. Lou Schizas. Many of us have already enjoyed Lou's astute observations earlier on this afternoon's panel. Lou is a lifelong promoter of self-reliance. Lou grew up in Queens, New York, and in Montreal. He bought his first pair of stocks at the tender age of 11, and he had started his first business at the age of 15. You may know Lou from the radio. From 1999 to 2007, Lou was the founding senior on-air equities analyst for BNN and appeared on the popular Lou's Mailbag, which featured and analyzed over 16,000 stocks for viewers. Lou has long been respected for his efforts in helping investors improve their skills and knowledge. He was a professor of finance at Sheridan Institute of Technology in Oakville, where he helped his students get the most out of their investment in education. He's a graduate of the University of Western Ontario and did graduate work in economics at State University of New York at Stony Brook. He holds the Canadian Investment Manager designation and is a fellow of the Canadian Securities Institute. Please welcome the happy capitalist, Lou Schizas.
Okay, well, I know, and I want to thank you for having me here today, and I want to thank you all for coming out. And I know that I'm the only thing standing between you and the bar, so I'll be brief. I wanted to talk to you about capitalism because I think that the system that we all believe in is under attack. And if you doubt that, you just got to pick up the paper tomorrow morning or tune in the radio or turn on your TV, where you're going to hear about the concept of the Ontario Fair Housing Package. Now, this is a fantasy, a socialist, communist fantasy, that you can have a government program to make sure that housing is fair. Now, housing is a market like any other one that we know about. And how many people have seen government intervention in markets that has worked out for anybody? The governments in general are the biggest debtors in the economy. They strap on debt, they whip the taxpayer and make them pay more and more and more. Now, I don't know where you get the idea that you should have housing provided for you at less than market rates. I never heard of such a thing. When I was growing up, right? Nobody gave me a house. Nobody, if I had gone whining to society and said, oh, the housing prices are so expensive, they would have told me to get on your bike and get out of here. Who are you kidding? So the system that I believe in is under attack because there seems to be a certain weakness in society for listening to whining and complaining and hand-wringing by people in a leadership role. And I'm talking about the elected officials who go on and tell these fantasies to weak-minded individuals who actually think that the government is going to do something for them. Now, if you look at the reality, these proponents of the Ontario Fair Housing Initiative, okay, are the most incompetent managers you could imagine. So here's a cadre who, as a resume item, has brought you the billion-dollar debacle with the gas plants, the orange helicopter debacle in terms of emergency medical. They've also brought to your door some of the highest electricity prices in North America. And now they want to help people in the housing market. Well, if you look at some of their other resume items on the municipal level, Toronto Community Housing, how many people are familiar with that? Yeah, Toronto Community Housing is the single biggest slumlord in North America. In fact, while the Three Stooges were confirming how they were going to try this, federal, municipal, and provincial governments, the Three Stooges got together this week because Moe, Larry, and Curly thought that they could come up with a solution to high prices for housing in Ontario. I don't know what happened there. My God, is that a voice from above? So they came out today and said that the Toronto Community Housing was going to withdraw 7,500 housing units from their inventory because they were in such a miserable state of repair. So these geniuses, on top of throwing a tax on people that wanted to bring their capital to Canada and maybe buy some real estate, also thought they had a great idea, that they would bring in rent control. Now, most economists will tell you if you want to destroy a city, the best way is to bomb it from the air. The second best way is to bring in rent control. So Toronto Community Housing, operated by your municipal government, is a scandal beyond scandal. And there are people all lined up because everybody wants to get rent at a lower than market cost. But I don't know if they really understand you're going to be living in a slum. So they are now proposing that they are going to put rent control on the private sector that has housing units to rent out, and you're only going to be able to increase your rent by 2.5% per year. Now, how many people know what the current level of inflation is? Anybody? Somebody? You're all in finance. Sir, yes? 2%. Yeah, it's 2%. So you're not even going to you're going to cover inflation, and then you're going to get a 0.5% increase. What are you going to buy with that? A doormat? You're not going to be able to maintain your building. Within 20 years, you're going to have slums. Why? Because Mo, Larry, and Curly, the least capable managers, have now got their hands on the housing agenda. So what do I recommend? I recommend that you have to throw these bums out, and we need to get responsible managers in place in order to take care of the future that we want for our children and our grandchildren. I mean, clearly I look at this room, and I'm the youngest guy in the room. Well, okay, not 100%, but, you know, and I would say that for many in this room, like myself, money's wasted on us, right? What do we spend it on? We spend it on our families, our children, you know, our housing, our responsibilities, right? Our children's education and so on. You know, I mean, yeah, some people have hobbies and toys and all that stuff, but that's a byproduct of success. And sadly, what I'm seeing is capitalism, as I believe it to be, the greatest system in the world, right, which has enabled most of the people in this room to meet their dreams and objectives, right? I mean, I'm sure you're all very brilliant, but let's face it was capitalism that gave you the opportunities to use your creativity, your ambition, and your drive in order to get where you wanted to go. How many people here had something given to them? One person, two people, three people? How many people stole what they have? Oh, no elected officials here? Good. So most of the people in this room, except for the people who had things given to them, have worked for it. And that's what's required in order to build a society. And I think we're losing that passion, that you get up every day, you take care of your responsibilities, and you get at it. Now, you might ask yourself, who the hell is this guy, and why the hell is he talking like this? And I'll tell you exactly why. When I was a kid, I realized that I was born an economic slave, that no matter how much my parents loved me, they couldn't provide me with a livelihood and housing and nurturing throughout my entire life. In fact, at 18, they looked at me and said, "You got to get going, boy. You got to get off our payroll. We got some retiring to do." And, you know, I think that what's gotten lost over the last 30, 40 years is the fact that too many people are rent seekers. They don't want to work. They just want to rip and strip out of the people that are productive. So what I've observed over the course of my lifetime is a society that is moving closer and closer to the abyss. How do I see that? Look at the debt that on your behalf people have strapped on to your society that they can barely manage. And the best idea they have is to strap more debt onto the taxpayer. So I look at it and say it's not being well managed. The debt is accelerating. Why do we continue to put up with this? Well, I don't know. I think part of it is that they have found a willing participant in their scheme. And I often on the radio, on AM 640, refer to the pyramid of extortion. Now, there's one thing you can recognize from a pyramid. If you're not at the top, everything flowing down ain't no good, okay? So the pyramid of extortion is only interested in what you have to contribute to the upside. And if you talk to any responsible pension manager, they'll tell you that the pension schemes that have been foisted on the taxpayer on behalf of the public sector unions is going to crush your society. So how do we turn it around? You got to throw these bums out. You got to find responsible and accountable members to represent your interests and look after the interests of your families, okay? And so capitalism, yeah, it requires effort, work, and diligence. Yes, there are people that cannot take care of themselves, okay? And we need to recognize that, but there's a whole host of individuals that have problems that are really a byproduct of a lack of discipline, right? So if you want to come to me and tell me a story how, listen, I really would like to go to work, but I was banging heroin all night and I'm not in great shape. Well, you don't get a lot of sympathy from me, right? Because I make a reasonable amount of money. I have a reasonable capital base. I can't afford that stuff. You know, even if it was good for you, you know, from what people tell me this stuff costs, I can't afford that. And, you know, there's a lot of hand-wringing around, oh, what are we going to do about it? I said, you know, usually, you know, people that don't have a lot of discipline can get it from the military. So if you had a mandatory military service and you put people into a barracks and you got them up every morning at 5 o'clock, you know, they would become better people, right? Without discipline, there is nothing. So as a capitalist, why do I enjoy it? Because I know if I get up every day and I do my best job and I try not to offend as many people as I've offended here today, I could possibly get to where I want to go. And, you know, I came to this country with $800 in my pocket. So if there were poorer people than me, there wouldn't have been many. But I knew that if I applied myself, that good things could happen. And, you know, this is a great country, but unfortunately, like a lot of great countries, it's being run by idiots. So I would say to all of you that are in the habit of, you know, providing some kind of donations to political parties, I would encourage you to stop, okay? They don't represent your interest. They represent their own interest. The only thing that the political process and the pyramid of extortion is interested in is the pay, the perks, and the pensions that no one in the private sector will ever get. So why do I applaud capitalism? Because it works. Despite this massive burden of an overblown bureaucracy, you still have transportation, you still have nutrition, you still have electricity, you still have the opportunity to educate your children. Now, I'm not crazy about the quality of education these days. I think that too many of our educational institutions are about indoctrination, not education. But you have to manage that at home and teach your children what the differences are. So I look at it and say, I think capitalism works. It has worked for me. I know it has worked for all of you here in this room today. And I think that what we can do is apply ourselves and ask ourselves this question: why are we supporting candidates that don't support our country, don't support our families, and don't support where we want to take this society, which is a great society? So there you go. That's my speech for today. How are we doing for time? Are we getting questions? Anybody have any questions? There's a lady over here.
Are you sure you're not from Alberta?
Pardon me?
I said, are you sure you're not from Alberta?
I lived the first 19 years in Canada, in Alberta.
Ha, see, there we go. My next guess was Newfoundland.
It's a great province. And, you know, they have, you know, specific policies to deal with people. that don't want to work, they point them towards BC.
Bus leaves every hour. Just joking. You talk about the policies and the elected officials, but if you look at who people have to choose from, and you look at who is choosing not to run for politics, our choices are limited. So how do you solve the problem of getting good people, A, to even want to enter into the political arena that will make some of the changes that you suggested, but secondly, how do they get elected? Because right now, the government, through unions and employees and the significant size of it all, truly, people are not willing to bite the hand that feeds them. So when you're threatening their pension, you know,
Yeah.
they're not going to vote for that. So question one, where do you find these people? Question two, how do they get elected?
Okay, so I said, what you should do is stop funding them, right? So stop cutting checks to donate in order to try and curry favor with the Lord and the minister and all that. The other thing that I do actively is I work with great accountants so that I pay as little tax as possible. And, when you look at the sin taxes, gambling, smoking, drinking, I don't do those either. Okay, so I am cutting off the lifeblood they're trying to suck out of me in my effort to destroy them. And I encourage all of you to do the same things. Give them as little blood to keep them alive. They're just like a leech, okay? If you let them get on you, they're going to take every drop out of you. And so I think we need to be somewhat more aggressive. So when they come, would you like to come to a fundraiser with the minister? The answer should be no, thank you. And when it comes time, and I know we're going to be filing our taxes very shortly, you work with good to great accountants. And make sure you ask all kinds of questions so that you send as little of your money to them as possible. Eventually, it'll collapse on itself. Now, you might say, well, what happens to us then? The only thing I've ever gotten from a government is a tax bill. Okay, so they stopped sending those. And Eugene, could you please get some of your cyber criminals to attack Canada Revenue Agency and knock them out? Please. Just convince them that we'd like them. We'd embrace them. We'd give them the money that we would normally send to the pyramid of extortion. Anybody else got a question?
Yeah.
Yes, go
right
ahead.
Here, yeah. No smoking, drinking, or gambling. That's too boring a life. I can't do that. So I'm going to continue paying those specific taxes.
Well, you could do things like, skydiving, base jumping. If you need a thrill, you could do that.
So, the presentation is the happy capitalist.
Yeah.
And
I'm very happy.
Yeah. So. I guess today in Ontario we had the real estate tax, the foreign buyers tax that was placed on, and I'm curious about your perspective on that. Whether
I think it's racist.
So the happy capitalist. So the people generally getting off the plane from China are generally communists, and they're the ones buying the houses from the capitalists.
No, I don't agree with that.
So it seems a little.
I don't agree with that.
Fair
I
enough.
think that this has not been an evidence-based decision. This is a decision made by the pyramid of extortion in order to bamboozle people into saying, oh yeah, they're going to provide us with housing. Well, this is the same cadre that promised seniors long-term care. So when they were no longer able to take care of themselves, right, because of old age and infirmity and disease and what have you, there are 25,000 seniors in Ontario with no place to go. Now, do you really think they're going to provide housing? You know how long the waiting list is for people that want Toronto community housing? So they make these promises in order to make sure that they get their pay, their perks, and their pensions, and then all these promises or allusions to promises are done away with. So, communist Chinese coming to Canada with bags of money, I say clear the decks. Bring in more. Get that money working here.
Respectfully disagree, but
Okay, that's
thank
fine.
you.
You don't have to agree. But that's my position, is that, You know, the only people that are not being served by the fair housing package are homeowners. I'm a homeowner. How many people here own a home? Okay. And seniors. Because for the majority of residents of Ontario, their home represents the largest single financial asset that they have. So when you say, oh, we're going to stop the appreciation of your biggest asset, is it helping me? How is that helping me? How is it helping seniors, people that want to stay in their homes, that would like to maybe, fatten their larder with, some real estate profits to maybe get them to a decent retirement? Yes?
Lou,
Yes, sir.
you brought the real estate issue up, and it's topical today, but if you're a real capitalist, you haven't talked about the supply side. And, there's a lot of the commentary is saying that it's as much of a supply issue where there's been restrictions by government through development charges, taking on a lot of development lands, and that's a government problem too. So, I think no issues as simple as you're making out, but you didn't say anything about supply, and if you're really a capitalist, supply demand is kind of the fundamentals of it. So,
well, I look at it from a demand side. Okay, so I have choice in a capitalist society whether or not I buy now or buy later. That's my demand. That's how I express my demand. I'm not in the housing market, so I'm not supplying housing. You'd have to talk to a developer about that. And when I talk to developers, they'll all tell you, we want cheaper land. We're not going to build at those prices with these kind of restrictions, in this particular environment. Yes, sir.
Hi, you're the happy capitalist. What's your take on the future of capitalism? The big word right now is disruption. And we have, you mentioned transportation. And we had a stable, safe taxi industry that's being disrupted by Uber.
A little louder, please.
We had a stable, safe taxi industry that's disrupted by Uber. And at the start of the 20th century, if you had asked, Henry Ford was famous for saying, if I'd asked people, they would have said they wanted faster horses. But that's not what he did. He created an entire new industry, creating jobs, creating the American middle class, which is being threatened right now, and we have what we have right now in the United States.
I would disagree with that statement, and I'll tell you why.
Sorry, just my question is, what's your take on the future of capitalism, given that the future seems to be disrupting everything we have right now?
I think we need to protect capitalism. Capitalism has to evolve. There's no two ways about it. It can't stay. This is not, the capitalism that we have today is not the capitalism of Commodore Vanderbilt in the 1850s, right? It has changed appreciably. Yes, it needs to constantly evolve, but to be destroyed, for example, today the government of Venezuela seized an auto plant owned and operated by General Motors. Just because. Now, that's not the kind of country I want to live in. Now, in a sense, when you have a discriminatory tax on people coming from farther afield, and it's particularly aimed at the Chinese, okay? I don't hear people saying things like, oh, there's too many Germans buying real estate in Toronto. Oh, there's too many Brits buying real estate in Toronto. It is the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1923 brought right back to today. So where does capitalism go? Well, it certainly can't go to the extent of destruction in Venezuela, okay? The average Venezuelan has lost 19 pounds over the last year, not because they're all on the Dr. Bernstein diet or the, any of the other ones that are out there. It's because there's no food. So they're starving slowly. So that's what we need to look at. And if you look at a city like Detroit, the city of Detroit has gone through bankruptcy. Do you think you're going to miss that ride with, Mo, Larry, and Curly running the agenda provincially, federally, and municipally? I don't think so. Anybody else? We're going to wrap it up. I'm getting the get out. Thank you very much, my friends. Make it a profitable day.